Morning, everyone. How are you today? I think this period of time's probably getting few of us down at times, and we sort of seeing some sort of light on the horizon with Boris Johnson's pronouncements, although things have got to be clarified a bit more, perhaps. But we've got to keep going, haven't we? And we've got to keep going for the sake of each other, and particularly for the sake of the most vulnerable amongst us. And that's what we have to remember when we're feeling low, that we're doing something for someone who is in a more vulnerable position than ourselves. But at times like this, and I think all the way through, laughter is sometimes the best medicine. I'm not much of a joke person. I do tell them, and the worst sort of joke for me is the best sort of joke. The ones that appear unfunny, I find the funniest. But I like people who tell stories. I love to hear stories, funny stories based on real life. Are the best, I think, and one of my favourite storytellers is Billy Connolly, and I know the language can be a bit risk sometimes, but his humour is based on real life situations. It's real. It sort of shines a light on the absurdities of life. Peter Kay is the same. His humour is so popular because people can recognise themselves in it, can't they? And in the absurdities that he talks about. And I love Ricky Gervais because I always see a sort of sensitivity in his work that's perhaps not everyone sees. He's not everyone's cup of tea, is he? But I always see that real sensitivity to the human condition in all that he does. And his latest one, Afterlife, especially so. There's a few choice words in that as well, so be careful, but I would recommend it. And from times past, I love W.C. Fields for his verbal cleverness and his style of delivery. And my heroes are Laurel and Hardy. And there are those who view Stan and Ollie as being just slapstick humour, but I would disagree. I think their humour is based on a loving relationship between the two of them, and it's also the theme that runs throughout their work is forgiveness. How many times do one or other of them mess up, and they argue and they fight, and then they dust themselves off and they carry on as if nothing has happened. They're friends again, and they've got a hope in their heart that they won't ever mess up again. Everything's fine. But being human, they always do, and but they always forgive. If you watch them from that perspective, you'll see something different in them. They're just wonderful, comic geniuses. I once visited a friend of mine who had a new portrait on his wall, and it was a portrait of Jesus with his head thrown back, mouth wide open and laughing. And it surprised me. And I suppose immediately I sort of felt a bit uncomfortable with it at first. But why? Did Jesus laugh? Of course he must have done. And you can see glimpses of his humour in the Gospels if you look close enough. Because he wept, didn't he? And it stands to sense that if he shared our humanity, he must have laughed too. And yet the portrait was a surprise. And I'll come back to that theme later, but first I want to tell you a story about a surprise I once had. A few years ago, it was at the beginning of November, I think, and Mavroyan began acting strangely. Well, more strangely than normal. And I would come in from work and she would be on the phone to someone, and several times I heard her say in a hushed voice, "He's here now. I'd better go, but I'll ring you tomorrow." When I came into the room and asked who it was, she'd say, "No one," or "Wrong number," or "Someone trying to sell something." So, I took her word for it, but I was curious and a little suspicious. But anyway, I thought maybe I'd better up my game a bit. Start dressing better, looking more tidy, more presentable, having my hair cut more, taking her out more. You can see where my thoughts were going. Along with this, she banned me from going into the spare bedroom in the house, making me swear that I wouldn't enter it. And then she would disappear into the bedroom every evening for days on end, and all sorts of noises would come from the bedroom, whirring and banging, and an occasional expletive. If I ever knocked the door to ask if she was okay, she told me to go away, and also the secret phone calls were continued more frequently now, and she would take them in the bedroom that was barred to me. Anyway, this continued until about 2 weeks before Christmas. Christmas came, and on Christmas morning we sat down to exchange gifts, but this year it was all one way. It was me giving her the gifts, and there was not a gift in sight for me. Anyway, after a while, she told me that my gift was in the spare bedroom, and it was too big and heavy for her to bring down. It had been the reason that she'd forbade me to enter the room, as she told me. And we went upstairs, we entered the bedroom, and there was a large square shape standing in the middle of the room. And it was really big. And she said, "Happy Christmas. I hope you like it." So I went up to this square and took the Christmas paper off to reveal a wooden box made of chipwood, and with nails holding it together, and it was on casters and had a hinged lid. And I was getting excited now, what could be in the box? And whatever it was, it must be big. And I slowly opened the lid, but I closed my eyes to sort of increase the surprise. And when the lid was fully open, I opened my eyes. And guess what was in it? I bet you can't guess. Absolutely nothing. And I looked at Mavoy a little confused. And then she explained that the present was the box itself, and that I could put things in it. She'd made it herself, with guidance over the telephone, from a friend who was a carpenter, hence the secret phone calls. The problem was, he had been under the misapprehension that she was using a particular type of wood, and she thought that this was the particular type of wood, but in fact it was chipboard. So he'd given her instructions for something completely different. And when it wouldn't come together with the instructions that he'd given her, she'd use nails instead of a clamp and doweling and wood glue. And I think my disappointment must have shown, because she said, "A lot of love has gone into that." And I replied, "I know there has, and thank you." But in my head I said, "Yeah, a lot of love and a lot of nails at strange angles." Anyway, when we came to take the box out of the bedroom, we couldn't, because it wouldn't fit through the door. And when we moved from the house, the box was still empty and still in the back bedroom. Anyway, getting back to the surprise I felt at Jesus laughing, it got me wondering about my own view of Jesus and how it had changed and grown over the years. And when I was a child, all the adults around me talked about gentle Jesus, and the Bible was a book in the household revered but never read. I believed in Jesus, and the adults around me did, but we never really got beyond gentle Jesus. And the Hollywood films I watched didn't help either. Because I still see them as being stilted and airbrushed portrayals of Jesus. And when I got into my teens, I was becoming more interested in social justice. And a turning point in my life was when my RE teacher took a class to see The Gospel According to Matthew. And it was by an Italian director, Pasolini, who happened to be a communist. And most of my classmates were just happy to be out of the classroom and didn't take much interest in the film. They were mucking about. But I was surprised to see a very different picture of Jesus than I'd previously had. And I was transfixed by this film. And I have the film now on DVD, and I sometimes watch it again. And it was filmed in black and white, and all the actors were Italian peasants. There were no big stars in it. And that film made me in effect become more interested in Jesus and wanting to know more about him. I saw him as someone who was relevant and who was interested in some of the things that I was interested in particular social justice. And this was a catalyst for me wanting to know more. And the more I learned about Jesus, the more I began to see him as multidimensional. And as I got into adulthood, I began to read about the historical Jesus, looking at the religious and cultural context of his earthly life. And it opened up an even wider perspective. From the black and white film that had sparked my interest and resonated with me, to the colour of who Jesus is gradually came into focus. Not in a Hollywood Technicolor way, but in a real life way, relevant to today. The Son of God, Saviour of the world, Saviour of me, and more importantly, perhaps, real. Well, time to go now. I've been a bit long-winded today. I hope you don't mind. Look after yourselves and keep safe, and don't forget, Jesus laughed.